RockTrue Science is a cross-cultural response to the lack of diversity in STEM fields. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. RockTrue Science is designed to serve the intellectual need of fallen man while serving the desire for interdependence to better understand our physical world while still pursuing spiritual growth. RockTrue Science seeks to inspire, enlighten, and highlight upcoming and established local and international kings and queens of STEM fields while promoting Black consciousness and awareness of who we are and to whom we belong. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another evening of RockTrue Science. And I am super excited to talk about our Group 7. I believe it's group 6A, 6A. Yeah, because I got ahead of myself when I was doing the notes. Group 6A elements are oxygen group, also known as the chalcogens, and they are amazing in their own right. As we've probably talked about on pretty much every show prior to this, oxygen keeps popping on up. Why? Because it's important. That's why. So, without further ado, we're going to hop into these biogeochemical cycle videos for oxygen and sulfur, because as all of the other elements that are important to organic life on this planet, they all go through a natural cycle between organic and inorganic forms. And it is very important that we view these and see how our day-to-day lives are impacted by how these elements cycle through the environment. So we'll start with the oxygen cycle video, and then we're gonna come behind it with the sulfur cycle video. They're both pretty short, probably like 2.5, 3 minutes a piece. So it won't be too long, but they're pretty interesting, at least for me.
Ever wondered why we don't run out of oxygen on Earth? Welcome to Moo Moo Math and Science and the Oxygen Cycle. The oxygen cycle involves the movement of oxygen between biotic, which are living factors, and abiotic, which are non-living factors. The oxygen cycle maintains the level of oxygen in our atmosphere. Processes within this cycle are considered either a source, oxygen production, or a sink, which involves oxygen consumption. But first, where do we find oxygen on Earth? The largest reservoir of the Earth's oxygen is found in the lithosphere. Silicate and oxide minerals of the crust and mantle make up large portions of the lithosphere and contain oxygen. The atmosphere is made up of roughly 21% oxygen. The hydrosphere, which is the water on Earth, is 33% oxygen by volume. The biosphere, which is the sum of all ecosystems, is 22% oxygen and is found mainly in organic molecules. Oxygen moves from the atmosphere to the lithosphere and the biosphere. Let's see how oxygen is cycled among these different regions on Earth. Plants, along with phytoplankton and other organisms that carry out photosynthesis, release oxygen into the atmosphere. In fact, marine plants produce most of the oxygen in our atmosphere. Animals, some bacteria and protists, and other organisms that carry out cellular respiration use oxygen in order to create ATP, and they release CO2. Sunlight produces some oxygen when sunlight reacts with water vapor in the atmosphere. Decomposition, which is the breakdown of once living organisms, uses oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Microbes use oxygen in order to break down the organisms. Rusting or oxidation involves oxygen in order to create the rust on many metals. Combustion or burning of objects like coal, wood, or fossil fuels also require oxygen and use some of it up. The oxygen continues to move around the Earth from producers to consumers to keep the level in balance. Thanks for watching, and Moo Moo Math uploads a new math and science video every day. Please subscribe and share.
Dude, she running out. Now this is for the ozone. This is actually an allotrope of oxygen, and this is also a part of our environment. So this is equally as important as the cycles.
Hey, want some sunscreen? This stuff is really strong. SPF 4000 or something.
Nah, I don't need it. I've heard the ozone in the atmosphere protects me from the sun's harmful rays.
Really? Is that true? Is the ozone a good thing? I've always heard that it was bad. And what is ozone anyways?
Great questions. Ozone is important, and it can be good or bad depending on where it is. Ozone is a gas made up of 3 oxygen atoms bonded together that occurs in the Earth's atmosphere. In the troposphere, where we live and where airplanes fly, small amounts of ozone are produced naturally by plants and lightning. A larger amount is put there by human activities like factory and car emissions, which contributes to air pollution.
Ozone in the troposphere isn't a good thing.
But in the stratosphere, the layer above the troposphere, ozone is a good thing. It protects us from much of the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation.
Ozone helps to block most UV radiation coming from the sun. That's because instead of the radiation making it all the way to the Earth's surface, the radiation is absorbed by ozone and oxygen molecules. This radiation provides the energy needed for a series of reactions to occur. These reactions destroy and create ozone all the time. In the stratosphere, UV radiation breaks up oxygen molecules into free oxygen atoms. These free atoms bond with other oxygen molecules to form ozone. UV radiation is also absorbed by ozone molecules. This breaks ozone apart into oxygen molecules and single, very reactive oxygen atoms. This system is in balance, or equilibrium, because both the destruction and creation of ozone happen at the same rate.
So ozone always stays the same? What about this ozone hole I've heard of?
Right, the hole. The stratosphere might seem far away from us, but it isn't immune to human impacts. In the 1970s, scientists who had been monitoring the amount of ozone in the stratosphere over Antarctica since the 1950s noticed that it was the lowest they'd ever seen. In the 1920s, humans started using gases called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, in refrigerators, air conditioners, and later in aerosol sprays. Over time, these CFC gases made their way up through the atmosphere into the stratosphere. In the stratosphere, UV radiation strikes CFC molecules, which causes them to release a free chlorine atom.
A chlorine atom can react with ozone, and it converts the ozone into O2 and a ClO molecule. And then a ClO molecule can react with an oxygen atom, and that forms O2, but the chlorine atoms reform again. And then the ClO plus O creates the chlorine atom again and another O2 molecule. So the net is you've taken ozone and you've converted it into 2 molecules of O2. So ozone goes to a regular oxygen molecule, right? But the chlorine atom is still there. And that's how it can act like a little Pac-Man and go on and eat up 100,000 ozone molecules. So that's a catalytic process.
Oh, that's what the ozone hole is.
It's not so much a hole as a thinning in the ozone layer, but that's still a problem. But there is good news. After noticing the low levels of ozone, in 1987, an international treaty called the Montreal Protocol was put into place to ban CFCs. Eventually, all 197 countries in the United Nations joined the ban. And it's been successful. Since 1993, CFC levels in the atmosphere have decreased significantly.
That's great news for the ozone layer and for us. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency says that the Montreal Protocol can help prevent millions of cases of deadly skin cancer from occurring in the future. But you should still wear sunscreen because even a healthy ozone layer doesn't block all of the sun's harmful UV radiation.
Oh, okay. Hey, if every country in the world came together to solve the thinning of the ozone problem, what global problems could we solve if we just put our heads together?
And now, oh yeah, we're gonna get all the videos out the way because we got a lot to cover. So the next one is the sulfur cycle video. It's just as short because the sulfur cycle is pretty short itself. But yeah, this is the last video for today.
Moo Math and Science in the Sulfur Cycle. All living things require sulfur in order to make protein. Let's take a look at how sulfur cycles itself around the Earth. First, sulfur reserves are found in the lithosphere and are released by weathering. In addition, hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide gas is released into the atmosphere by volcanic eruptions, hot springs, and the decay of biological material in swamps and bogs. Marine algae produce dimethyl sulfide that enters the atmosphere as tiny droplets. Sulfur dioxide gas also forms when dimethyl sulfide reacts with oxygen gas. The burning of fossil fuels also releases sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. Sulfur dioxide reacts with oxygen in the atmosphere and creates sulfur trioxide. The sulfur trioxide reacts with water in the atmosphere to produce sulfuric acid. Sulfur trioxide also reacts with the ammonia in the atmosphere to produce sulfate salts. The sulfuric acid and sulfate salts fall to the earth by precipitation like rainfall. The soil absorbs this sulfate salts. Plants then absorb the sulfur by absorbing the sulfate salts from the soil. Animals in turn get sulfur by eating the plants, and the animals release sulfur when they decay. As animals decay, they release sulfate salts and hydrogen sulfide. Anaerobic bacteria breaks down the hydrogen sulfide into sulfur gas, and the aerobic bacteria converts the sulfur into sulfate salts, which again the plants absorb. And then, like any other cycle, it just keeps going around and around. So there's the sulfur cycle. Thanks for watching, and remember, kindness multiplies kindness. Be kind to somebody today.
That's as good a message as any at the end of that one. So now to get into the nitty and the gritty. So the oxygen group is a group that has 6 valence electrons. We've been talking about valence electrons all month long since last month as well. So it is the outermost electrons on any given element, and this particular group has 6 of those. So oxygen being at the top of this group is very electronegative because of its size. It is smaller than all of the other elements in this group, so it has a lot more electron pulling power to it. So, and also because it's pretty close to its noble gas configuration, so it's almost at its happy 8 valence electrons, it is more likely, as well as the other elements in this group, to accept 2 electrons. So these tend to form -2 oxidation states when they make bonds. So oxygen and sulfur are pretty similar in how they bond with other elements, even though they're very different in their uses and all of that stuff. But because they are they belong to the same group. They have very similar qualities in how they bond to things. Oxygen, being so electronegative, is actually what helps with making water so polar. So oxygen is the bigger atom in the water molecule, because hydrogen atoms are very small. They got the one electron, the one little nucleus, just hanging around in there. So most of the polarity quality of water is due to oxygen, mostly because of its size. So hydrogen, don't get me wrong, hydrogen definitely plays, because you can't have a polar substance or molecule without two things. So you need a negative atom or element and a positive atom or element, and or it can even be two molecules. So like phosphate molecules have a negative charge, and then you have hydrogen, which is positive. So when you have hydrogen phosphate, that is a polar molecule, because the opposite ends have different charges. So that's really what polar means, is two different things going on different sides. And this quality is actually what makes that little dip in the water. If you look at a glass of water, it has like a slight dip in the middle of it. That is due to the electronegative quality of the oxygen, or OH, because in water you have hydrogen, which is H plus in water in solution, OH, which is negative in solution, and then you have H2O, and then you might even have some H3O plus bumping around in there. But for the most part, water is very polar, and it has a lot of ions and things in it. And so, especially in a glass tends to interact with the oxygen in it because of the silicon. So the silicon it's not it's a structure, and it's hard, so it's set in place, so it can't move, but the water can. So the oxygen in the water reacts or interacts with the silicon in the silicon dioxide in the glass, and it ends up crawling slightly up the glass. So that's why the edges are a little bit higher and the middle dips a little bit. So that's why when you take measurements in your science classes or in a beaker and things like that, or even if you want to get real precise when you're baking or cooking or something in your glass measuring cup, then you would measure from the meniscus, because that is quote unquote the true surface of the water. I know oxygen just does some amazing things. And as you can see from the oxygen cycle, it interacts with pretty much everything in some type of way, and everything uses it in some type of way, especially organic molecules. So in the sulfur video, heard of H3O? I know, yeah, H3O is definitely a thing. And if you work with acids and bases a lot, H3O is actually extremely important, because that's why not all acids are dissolved in water, because it changes the acidity, especially if you're looking for, like, if you're trying to create a buffer solution or make a specific type of acidic solution. Not everything is always dissolved in water, because sometimes it forms those hydronium ion, and that's actually how they, you can test for the pH of certain things, because hydronium exists. That's what it's called, hydronium. So H3O plus, and some acids actually just give off free hydrogen ions, which are the H plus. So it depends on what you're trying to measure. But when you're measuring the pH, and you have to calculate it, you actually have to consider the H3O plus that's also present in the solution. So yeah, that's where the math gets hairy and a little bit complicated. But as you saw in the sulfur video, there are bacteria that are called anaerobic. So anaerobic means no air, no oxygen. So those bacteria have to be in a oxygen-free environment, because oxygen actually will cause their cells to burst. So it will kill them. So that's why a lot of times, like to keep bacteria and things down, like especially like the really like nasty bacteria down in your home. A lot of they say let some fresh air up in here, all that. It's helpful because it stops anaerobic bacteria from growing, which tends to be the decomposing bacteria. So the bacteria that makes meat and things like that decompose faster. So yeah, that's good to know, right? And aerobic bacteria uses oxygen in its cellular respiration, and so anaerobic bacteria uses sulfur in its cellular respiration, because sulfur is a group 6 element. So sulfur replaces the role that oxygen plays in aerobic bacteria and aerobic metabolism. So it does pretty much the same thing. So that's why learning about these group elements is so useful, because sometimes having these interchangeable elements can create a whole different situation, as you can see with the aerobic versus the anaerobic bacteria. They have similar processes, but they have very different roles that they play in our biological ecosystems. And when they mentioned the like the marshes and bogs and things, if you've ever been to like swampland, and you probably didn't even have to go to swampland, like if you've walked on like the side of the road or somewhere where there's like really, really tall grass and not like a whole lot of like space, and it's been really hot and a lot of rain, like in the spring and stuff like that, like you'll smell that kind of sulfur smell, and that's the anaerobic bacteria that's living in those like in the under layer in the water, and they are decomposing whatever has died over there, the dead plant material and things like that, and they help return that organic material back to the earth so that it can fill up the cycle. And at one point in time, there was a large problem with marshes and bogs and things being drained because of the like I said, things die in it, and then because it's a anaerobic, so there's no oxygen in there, it doesn't necessarily just get evaporated back up into the atmosphere and come down in the rain and things like that. So a lot of the organic material that decomposed at the bottom of those marshes and bogs was eaten up by the anaerobic bacteria and all that, and it became petroleum. So they were draining entire ecosystems for petroleum, and that was a problem. Yes, that was a very big problem, because there are tons of animals that rely on those ecosystems. And yeah, it wasn't potable water, but the things that grew in that water actually helped, other things, the bugs that ate the things that lived on, like all of that. Like you would be surprised at like what lives in, on, and around like the stinky water. And when they were draining it, entire ecosystems were dying. Like, and the only reason why they noticed it is because it was like animals that either like we needed or used in some type of way, and we were like, dang, where'd they go? So that's what made them notice, like, oh yeah, y'all kind of drained the ecosystem that fed the animals that animal ate. So yeah, so a lot of species that ended up on the endangered list were endangered because their food sources disappeared, and we probably didn't care about their food source or whatever fed their food source. So that stuff never makes it to the endangered. Like that's why I'm like, so y'all put like pandas and stuff on the endangered species list, but it's plenty of species that like we think are like gross or we don't have a direct use for that never made the endangered species list, or we never realized that we may go extinct. And that happens all the time, like and like just too often, much too often. Like, of course, everything isn't gonna be around forever, and things evolve and change based on how the environment is changing. But when the environment changes too fast, it doesn't allow these species to adapt and continue to live on, even if they look a little different or they do something slightly different. So we tend to lose that source of DNA and Like it get real complicated, okay? And that's why it's called an ecosystem. And it's usually like I would say compared to like a spider web. So it shows how one little tiny insect is connected to all of these different types of animals, their lifestyles, and their sources, all of that stuff. And so that's why learning and paying attention in your environmental science. I don't even know if they just randomly teach environmental science anymore, because I went to a college prep school and I was super nerdy, and I ended up taking a college level environmental science course in high school. So that's why I was experienced to a lot of this. I exposed to a lot of this stuff very early on, but that was by choice. And not everybody is choosing to learn about their environment around them and how they affect it, because ultimately how we affect the environment will affect us. And it's already occurring. So the higher instances of cancers and skin cancer, even as you can see from the hole in the ozone layer, if you look up statistics, skin cancer spiked dramatically, and the hole isn't even over where a lot of people live. So that just goes to show how something that affects some other part of the world actually affects the entire world. And then also because the ozone layer was thinned out more on at the Antarctic pole and all of that stuff, you have those same CFCs and also a bunch of hydrocarbons and things creating greenhouse gases, warming it up even more in here. And because there's less protection over the Antarctic for ozone, most of those rays that are usually stopped by the ozone and just creates more ozone at that layer is actually coming through and heating up those hydrocarbons even more. So that's the idea of global warming. And even though when you hear the actual number of the degrees that it changed, I think it's like 0.1 or 0.2 degrees Celsius or something like that over the course of like 10 years. Like, it sounds like something very minuscule and insignificant, but it is actually very significant. And you would be surprised at how sensitive the earth is to temporal changes. Well, and it's not even temporal change, because like temperature is like, okay, it's 75 degrees in here. I turn the thermostat up. It's 77 degrees in here. That's temperature. Climate is a entire geochemical, that type of thing, system or process. So it's a state of the entire temperature change. So not just the temperature or how the weather and things are affected at one point in the globe. It actually affects the entire globe. And then on top of that, because most of the water that is in our Earth's surface is actually not in oceans and things like that, it is in icebergs. So all of those tall frozen mountains of ice, that actually contains more of the water and things that's on our Earth's surface than the actual oceans and seas and things like that. And so as those are starting to melt, sea levels rise dramatically, and it is now becoming an us problem. So we have entire cities that are slowly sinking, being drowned out, flooded. I believe France had to basically make like a whole like mechanism that lifts like this plate to keep the water from flowing into the city, because they would be like almost like need to thigh deep in water whenever the sea level would rise. And a lot of that city, like, yeah, a lot of that coastal area, like Italy, parts of France, because I think a little bit of France is like right there. So all that stuff that's right there on the water is now experiencing problems. And then there's channels that, the canals and stuff that flow into and through water, through these giant landmass areas. So that's why France is having such problems, because its canal gets flooded when the water levels rise in the seas. So they had to like essentially make a mechanism that kept that water out and stop businesses like property damage like crazy. And then not to mention that all of this water is bringing in bacteria. So now you have all of these instances of potentials for disease and things like that. Mold, of course, is a huge problem for respiratory diseases and respiratory issues and things like that. Exactly. Yeah, we gotta do way better than this, and not even just in what we're doing now, but to have the foresight for how what we're doing now and also what we're not doing now is going to affect what'll be left for who's here when we're gone. And that's why I try and promote as much of a collective mentality as possible, because just because it's not affecting you right now here or whatever doesn't mean that it won't be left to be a problem for someone else. Like, when you care about other people, then you care about what you do right now. And that's important. And sulfur is also important in your hair. So it makes up a lot of the proteins that are found in your hair. And the more disulfide bonds that are in your hair, the curlier it is. So we can actually bring up the pic for our hair bond so we can get a look-see at that. And so you wouldn't necessarily think about, like, because your hair is like really thin. So you'd be like, oh, this is just hair. Like, I don't even know like what to just generally think about it. But there's a lot going on inside that teeny tiny little thin hair shaft, and it's made up of different types of proteins, and those proteins have sulfur in it. And the sulfur, depending on, I guess, how your DNA works and how it tells those proteins to form, the sulfur in in the proteins in your hair. So this is happening within the hair shaft. So this isn't between different strands of hair. This is in one strand of hair. So those sulfur atoms, or within that protein molecule, they end up making bonds with each other, and the bonds end up making this kind of crinkly type protein in your hair. So the more of those disulfide bonds you have in your hair, the curlier your hair will be. So when I first figured it, I was like, dang, I must have like a ton of sulfide bonds. And then there's also other things that contribute to, like, kind of even more so the curl and the texture and the kind of crinkle factor is you have salt bonds. So those usually form between two different let's see what I got here. Make sure I'm telling y'all correctly, because I don't want to send y'all off. Between different types of polar molecules within the protein. So these are affected by the pH changes. So the relaxers and perms. A perm is not a straightening chemical. A perm actually is a curling chemical. So when you see, especially like people that normally have like really straight hair, and you see them with curls the next day, and it's like boom, they got the look. That is a perm. Okay, so a perm is a basic chemical, and when I say basic, I don't mean like standard or regular or whatever. No, I mean basic as in pH. So it tends to be not between 9 and 14, because 14 is the highest pH. So it tends to be between 9 and 14. So extremely basic, which is why it can be very damaging to your scalp, because your scalp is actually slightly acidic. So a healthy scalp is a little bit acidic, like I think like 6 or 5 or something like that. And so when you put these basic chemicals on your hair to make it curl up even more, then you can damage the hair in doing so, because you're breaking these salt bonds. And the lye in a relaxer actually helps with breaking the disulfide bond. So lye is actually extremely basic as well, but it's the activator and thing that you put in, that you mix into it to activate the base material. And that's why it has that little funky smell to it when you put it on your hair, because that is the sulfur reacting with with the chemicals that you're putting on your hair. And then we also have hydrogen bonds in our hair. And all of this stuff is important for the protein function in our hair, but hair itself is dead. So that's why you don't feel it when you cut it, because there's no nerves in it. There's no blood that flows through it. But the hair follicle, the root of the hair, is alive, is very much alive. That's why it hurts when you pull it out.
So, question.
Mhm.
So, it sounds like sulfur is good for our hair. So, but I always see on most of the shampoos sulfur free and product sulfur free.
No,
As
not
if,
sulfur, sulfate.
okay.
Yeah. So sulfur is just S, and then sulfate is the SO4 2 negative. So it is actually an ion, and those ions, like I said, interact with the salt bonds in your hair, and that can make your hair feel dry and crunchy because it affects the pH of your hair, and it can make it more brittle because it's breaking these salt bonds in your hair.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. And oxygen is actually blue. So that's why the sky looks blue, because of the oxygen in the atmosphere. So liquid, oxygen itself is actually colorless and odorless, the gas, but liquid oxygen. So the water vapor in the air is actually why it's blue, why the sky is blue. And as the water vapor gets denser and denser, it forms clouds, and then it gets more dense, and then the clouds precipitate because the water has reached maximum density and can drop on down. What is this? Sulfur has so allotropes, as I mentioned many times before, are different structures of the same element. So they either are different ways that the element comes together with itself so that it stacks up, or makes, its physical form is different. So not its phase. So liquid, gas, solid, those are phases, not forms. So oxygen, O2, the gas, is one form, and O3, ozone, the gas, is another form, and that is the allotrope, because both are naturally occurring and very stable. So allotropes tend to be stable, alternate forms of the same thing. And sulfur has a ton of those, mostly because, like I said, oxygen is pretty stable in itself, but sulfur has I think up to 15 or 16. I don't know. Don't quote me on it. It has a lot, like 20 something different allotropes, and they vary in color, and most of them are shades of yellow. So that's why most of the time when you think sulfur, you think yellow. So and I know that the hair brand Sulfur 8, that's what they're referring to. They're referring to the Sulfur 8 allotrope, which is the I believe that's the most common allotrope of sulfur. And selenium. Okay. So selenium it's a metal. I believe it's a metal. Yeah, it's a metal, not a metalloid. So oxygen and sulfur are non-metals, and completely non-metal. And selenium is a metalloid. That doesn't sound right. Hold on, let me double check. Make sure I ain't telling y'all. Okay, yeah, selenium is a metalloid. Okay, because I feel like that's not right. So it's not quite a metal, and then mostly because it doesn't conduct electricity well at all, and it's useful in our body. So I know you be like, metals in our body. Like, yes, we need some of them. Not all of them are good for us, but selenium is definitely one of those that are good. But don't overdo it just because it's good and it's important. You can definitely overdo it. So everything in moderation is key. So if you pull up the pic of the chart with selenium in the middle, and it's got like all the stuff around it. So selenium is useful in our thyroid gland. It helps make that the functioning and the synthesis, so making thyroid hormones. So T3 and T4 are our thyroid hormones, and I believe T3 is the most important one. T4 is usually how it's produced, and then it gets converted to T3 for use. Our liver also helps with the production of T3, hormone from T4, but our thyroid gland actually can directly make those. And selenium also protects against oxidative stress in our brain and neural tissue. So this helps with like prevention of, degenerative neurological disorders like dementia, Alzheimer's. So making sure you're getting a good source of selenium early on in your life before you start seeing symptoms of this can help prevent the early onset of those, and maybe even completely prevent it from ever showing up. It is useful in our gastrointestinal tract, as that it helps with the microorganisms and stuff that live there. It make digestive enzymes, so they use it in their cellular functions. It also makes up the what is this? Oh, see, they I'm trying to like translate from the science words into like regular words for y'all, because like if I read it, you'd be like, the what, and the huh. So it says the immunomodulatory effects of intestinal epithelial cells. So basically, the immune function of our digestive system is supported by selenium, and protection of intestinal mucosa during chemotherapy via its anti-inflammatory effects. So basically, it keeps your digestive tract properly lubricated by reducing inflammation. Inflammation can either increase mucus production or decrease mucus production, and this can be a good or a bad thing depending on where it is. So in our intestinal tract, you definitely want mucus to be there in proper amounts, because that is how things keep moving. It protects the epithelial cells, are just basically top skin cells. So the skin cells in your digestive tract, which is important for absorption and basically absorption, and also protecting your your bloodstream from bacteria from that don't belong in there from entering it. So if you have tears and things in the skin lining of your intestine, it could be a cause for infection, which we don't want. And it's suppression of cytotoxic cytokine production. So cytokine is just something that's usually a byproduct of some type of metabolic process, either by the bacteria in your system or basically the bacteria in your system tend to make that. And your immune system relies on selenium for regulation. Basically, it lets your immune cells proliferate or multiply when you have an immune response, and then it also helps them calm down. So in the anti-inflammatory, so when your immune system is triggered, it creates an inflammatory response overall, because that's part of your immune system is inflammation. So the heat, swelling, and things like that is actually a part of protecting you. So when the threat is taken care of, this should go away. And so the problem tends to come in when the inflammation doesn't go away. So selenium is useful in calming everything back down. In your liver, lungs, and kidneys, like I said, selenium is important in your liver for protecting against permanent liver damage. So especially like if you've had hepatitis C basically ruins your liver. It attacks your liver, and this is bad because your liver is your main toxin removing system in your body. So if you have liver failure or decreased liver function, you can get very sick just from regular stuff because things aren't always toxic at first. So like vitamins and things, those are useful and helpful. However, if your kidneys aren't functioning well or you're taking in too much, your liver is the one that helps filter that stuff out of your blood, depending on the type of vitamin, because your kidneys also do this. So this is why these two organs are your main detox system, because depending on if it's a water soluble or fat soluble vitamin is going to determine which organ is detoxing it. So your liver mostly detoxes fat soluble vitamins. If you have like too high levels of it, your liver will go ahead and clean it out and break it down or convert it into something that won't be toxic to you in higher levels. And lung protective effects against inflammation and oxidative stress. So this helps with in the sulfur video, not the sulfur, the ozone video, we saw where it showed on the lower level where we're breathing in air that smog is actually a source of ozone in our breathable atmosphere, which is bad because ozone is actually toxic to us. And so selenium helps with the damage caused by things like smog or ozone. Not sure about like carcinogens and like cigarette smoke and things like that. Not sure about that, but it definitely does help protect you from general toxins in the air and things like that. But as far as like you forcing the smoke down there, I don't know. I don't know. So I try to keep up with like the newer medical studies and things like that, because they definitely love telling you like, oh, this damage is irreversible, but low key, like a lot of stuff is pretty reversible if you stop doing the thing that causes the damage and then you do more of the stuff that either helps regenerate, because your body is constantly regenerating cells. So for them to say it's like completely irreversible, I don't know, it just sounds like a scam to me. But if you do more things that help your body regenerate new cells and protect against oxidative stress is basically where free radicals and other things that kind of are given off from metabolic processes, from exposure to sunlight, different things like that, toxins in your body that interact with other elements and chemicals and things can cause that, and just the general byproducts of cellular metabolism. So your cells doing exactly what they're supposed to do still causes oxidative stress as a byproduct. So what selenium helps with is basically the regeneration of these things, and so that's why it's considered a type of, not considered, but it's important in the formation of important antioxidants and the efficacy of those. So how efficient they work in your body and their activation. And selenium has antimicrobial and anti-parasitic effects. So it's used in antiviral, antibacterial, so like staph, antifungal, Candida albicans, which is basically yeast infections, and anti-helminthic, so helminthic. So a helminth is a type of like parasite. It's a little worm, so wormish. And so basically selenium actually helps in protecting you against these things or the overgrowth of these things, because some of this stuff we come into contact with, and if you have healthy levels of selenium in your body, you won't even notice it. Your body being fought it off and went on about its day before it affects you. But when you have a compromised immune system, low nutrient intake, which includes selenium among other things, then that's when you start seeing the overgrowth of these things, yeast infections. It's a lot that goes into that as well, like pH imbalances and things like that. But what you eat, your nutrient intake is definitely a large factor in how well your body handles coming into contact with these things. And super important, it is a anti-mutagenic and anti-carcinogen. So basically, and being anti-mutagenic basically means that if you come into contact with something like radiation or something like that, radiation tends to have mutagenic effects. Basically, it causes a genetic mutation in your DNA somewhere. And anti-carcinogen just basically means anything that causes cancer, it fights against that thing causing cancer in your body. So, yeah, which is, dangerous for, your DNA. And if your DNA is damaged, then the cells that are meant to be replicated or duplicated from those cells are now mutated as well. So that's why you can be born and be perfectly fine, and then some years down the road, boom, you got cancer or you got something, and it was like, well, I had my DNA checked when I was younger and they said nothing was wrong. And it's like, even if you don't have a genetic predisposition for any of these things, you can end up getting it anyway just from having damaged DNA or being exposed to a lot of carcinogens and not having a resistance to it by keeping your nutrient levels up, especially with selenium. And like I said, it has antioxidative properties in that it reduces oxidative stress. And another important to life is that it helps in it improves conception, so for reproduction. So it actually helps strengthen the integrity of sperm cells so that they can maneuver through the harsh environment of the vagina to get to the uterus and the egg, because everything about the vagina is meant to protect it from anything from the outside, like including sperm. And it knows that that's for life and all. It's like, that's cool and all, but you got to make it through the gauntlet first. Okay. Only the best will survive. So that's what it does. So men, if you are trying to get your wife pregnant and y'all trying, yeah, it may not be nothing wrong with your sperm count and things like that, but you should be eating a healthy, nutritious diet to make sure that your soldiers are marching at full capacity. Growth and development. Okay, so selenium is very important in the regulation of development and growth in the body. So in anything, won't get in here, right? And so selenium, as you can see, is super duper important. It has so many functions throughout our body, and it's actually one of those trace elements. So it's not required in like really high amounts, but it is definitely one of those essential minerals that we have to take in daily. And so there is a list of foods that are high in selenium. And a lot of these are like nuts, seeds, and legumes, so beans. So get your beans. And it says brown rice on here, but it was something. Oh, brown rice tends to have arsenic in it, so I don't necessarily suggest that. But definitely like nuts, mushrooms, oats, so whole grain, as little processing as possible. Oats, shiitake mushrooms. Those tend to be, I think they're is that Japanese, but you can find those in the grocery store. I've been seeing those a lot more in just in the general like food section next to the portobello mushrooms, but not the portobello mushrooms. So crimini mushrooms, those are another variety of mushroom, edible mushroom that's been a lot more popular in the produce section. Tofu is high in selenium. So like even if you're not like trying to like go vegan or vegetarian or anything like that, tofu is actually pretty nutritious. So I would suggest like getting some, and you can add it to a meat dish and it'd be fine. Like if you normally want to have like some chicken, have you some chicken and then have like a tofu salad on the side. Okay. Whole wheat bread, so obviously stuff that's made from like oats and things like that, and wheat grain, will be high in selenium. Sunflower seeds. I used to love me some sunflower seeds, man, especially the nacho cheese ones. Didn't they like discontinue those or something? Like, what happened to them? Like, why did they?
I was about to say, I never even heard of the nacho cheese one.
Man, that used to be like bartering chips. Like we was in jail or something, but we was in school with the nacho cheese. Something like, look, I'll give you two, and they was only 25 cents a pack. So like this was back when like chips and stuff was 25 cents. They would have the little packs that was 25 cents. And you go to the candy lady store, you can get some. And be like, dang, she was out of the nacho cheese. Like, I got some nacho cheese. And was like, oh, well, I'll trade you these barbecue for like, well, what you gonna do for it? Because I don't really like the barbecue, but like, we was definitely using those as like as bargaining chips for reals. And so also, so like you would like, as you saw in the sulfur cycle, like sulfur is definitely in plants and food that we eat. So I also looked up, I looked it up, a list of foods that are rich in sulfur. So your cruciferous vegetables, like your broccoli, cauliflower. Cauliflower is actually like great. Okay, so it has its own nutrient profile. Even though it looks like broccoli, it is not quite broccoli, but it's not really a fake vegetable either. I know people like come like, it's a fake. Most of the like by people's standards of what is a fake vegetable, like most of the vegetables that we eat are fake vegetables because they're cultivated. They are not wild form, and the DNA in those plants are heavily modified from what it started out as because of how we grow it. So yeah, that's why I encourage people to to get into the science of stuff, because you might say something that's a little too general, and then like if you're talking to somebody like me that knows the difference, like you won't sound like you know what you're talking about. And no one wants to sound stupid, okay? Especially if you're not. So it's okay to be ignorant, but it's not okay to be stupid, all right? So ignorant just means not knowing. Stupid means you don't know on purpose, okay? You okay with that. Don't be stupid, all right? Fulfill that. Go and seek the knowledge, okay? To step out of that ignorance, okay? That's when it's okay to be ignorant, because if you weren't ignorant, you don't get to learn new stuff. So I love being ignorant and stuff. I'll be like, oh, so what that do? And why they do that? Oh, okay. So if I see. And then, I go and try to apply it. So, allium vegetables are the onions. So onions, shallots, all of the onion varieties, red, the white, yellow, whatever, sweet, all of those, allium. Eggs, flax seeds, walnuts, red meat, legumes again, dairy products, fruits, and seafoods. And for the seafoods, I wish I had a look. I should have looked up that list. But for the seafoods, I would definitely say be mindful of the source of those, because yes, mercury in fish is still a problem because we never cleaned out the ocean. Like we didn't clean the mercury out of stuff. So it's still a problem. So usually mercury and other heavy metals that tend to be an issue in fish are a bigger issue in large fish, because, and I believe I mentioned this when we were talking about mercury. This is why I love going through the periodic table, because we can definitely reference and go back, and then you see the connection no matter where you are on the table. All right. So the larger fish eat smaller fish, and smaller fish eat smaller fish, and smaller fish eat small things, and live in the same environment that is contaminated with the mercury. So this thing called biological magnification makes it where the concentration increases as you go up the what is that? I forget what they call that. The food chain. See, it was like brain fart. As you go up the food chain, the concentration of that heavy metal increases because the sources are more abundant. So the bigger the fish is, the more sizes of fish that are below it that it can eat. So it actually has more access to this heavy metal, and then because it tends to live longer, it has more time to increase this heavy metal concentration in his body. So like tuna and stuff like that is a freshwater fish. So, and a lot of tuna we buy is farmed. So it tends to not have a problem with that. But like if you get wild caught stuff, definitely be mindful of where it's being caught. Do your research. You can look into the company. They say all that stuff on their website, and you can usually find how they test for mercury levels, because most fish companies have to test for these things and all of that to make sure that they're not killing off their consumers, because they want people to keep buying it. So definitely do your research. And last but not least, sulfur is important in your body because it makes this very important. I believe this is an antioxidant, but it's definitely something that our body makes, and it's called glutathione. So most compounds or things that have sulfur in it will have this end in the thione type thing. I don't know why. I asked a long time ago and they told me, and then I don't know. It didn't seem useful. So I forgot I forgot why instead of it having like a sulfur type thing, the IUPAC people decided to name them thiones. So glutathione helps with antioxidant support, and it may help with the activity of other antioxidants such as vitamin C and E. So yeah. Age support. So it may help maintain your systems as you age, including your eyes and skin. Immune health support. Like this is the first place I heard of glutathione was in the immune health function. And kind of the antioxidant thing, but mostly in the immune health support. So studies show that adequate glutathione levels in the lymphoid cells, so you have different lymphoid cells all throughout the body, so that your body can have an immediate immune response to stuff that occurs closest to it, so you're not just waiting for it to come all from one centralized source. So this is throughout different nodes in your body. And function at its best. So lymphoid cells produce antibodies that destroy cellular invaders such as bacteria and viruses. So having proper glutathione levels helps your body protect itself properly. And super important is heart health, okay? Because your heart, you can't live without it. There's no way around it. And so it may support a healthy cardiovascular system, especially with respect to healthy circulation, and maintain a healthy cholesterol profile. So sulfur, I'm telling you, it's important in its own right. And this is also one of those, excuse me, I drank my tea too fast earlier. Sulfur is very important in its own right, and as you can see, even though it's not necessary in super high levels in our body, because even the foods that are rich in sulfur have these are microgram to milligram amounts in it, so it's not a whole lot of it, but having access to these on a regular basis, as you can see, supports a ton of important functions throughout your body. So this is why you got to eat a well-balanced, and as I say, well-balanced, like try different stuff, especially if it's a vegetable. If it grows out the ground, trust me, your body can use it. So if you're like, oh, that's nasty, we'll figure out how to make it taste good. I don't know. That's how I end up having to talk to my clients. Well, I don't eat broccoli because I don't know. We'll figure out how to make it taste good. All right. That's your cruciferous vegetable, and especially like for women, this is extremely important for hormonal balance. So if you having like mood swings like crazy, your sleep is jacked up, your periods are off cycle, and like all kinds of mess, you probably not getting enough of these trace elements, your selenium, your zinc, your sulfur, your because as you can see, selenium affects your thyroid function. Your thyroid function is important for your metabolism. And also your hypothalamus works with some of these trace elements and things like that. And that's important for your hormone regulation, and also dealing with stress. The oxidative stress, that's a cellular type of stress, but your overall stress, like what makes you anxious, what makes you worry, what elicits fear in you and triggers that fight or flight response, is going to determine how well all the other stuff in your body works, because that response is not meant to be on all the time. And so if you don't have a calm down type diet that that can help you calm down from that elevated stress level, then you can end up tiring out these systems that are meant to just kind of be activated for like a second or two. And once the thread is over, then you should calm down within minutes to a few hours. But if your heart rate is still kind of high, your breathing is still shallow, you're still sweating your nerves, or you're and this is like hours, like, is any of these no. But dark chocolate is actually, yes, dark chocolate is a good source of, I believe, is zinc. And you can also get a couple of these other things, like the selenium, I believe, too, is found in dark chocolate, but in smaller amounts. The foods I listed are higher in selenium than other stuff, but you can definitely, but that's what I'm saying, like pair it up. And a lot of people don't like dark chocolate because it's bitter, but I found that when you eat fewer artificial sweeteners and processed sugars, dark chocolate actually tastes pretty sweet. So, and like I say, you can pair it with other stuff. And I had did those Bliss Bites on RockTrue Cafe Live, which is a wonderful snack that has dark cocoa powder in it. So you're getting your your adaptogen, So an adaptogen helps with that stress response I was talking about earlier. It helps your body to cope better with different types of stressors, and it can help reduce anxiety, depression, or it can help improve an invigorating response. So an excited response, like you want to be, if you're joyful, it can increase that type of response. So adaptogens help you adapt to your environment better, and cope with things better. So ashwagandha, ginger, turmeric, and ginger and turmeric are super anti-inflammatory and just tasty. But yeah. So, so the experiments for next week are going to be colors. So we're mostly going to be doing stuff that's going to be dealing with color manipulation, moving it, and all of that stuff. So I don't want to go into too much detail, because then I'll just like give away the whole experiment. And I kind of want to make it a surprise a little bit. But one of them I will say, because you can actually do it at home. So that's going to be our home experiment. But I'm getting all of my materials from Mel Science, so they'll be sending me all the stuff for all of these. But if you have like food dye, you can drop like different color dyes into some water, into some cups of water. Glass is better, so you can see through it. And then take some paper towels and then set it in the glass and over into the other one, and then it'll make the color kind of crawl into the other glass. And then you just string them around in a circle, and then the colors will mix and merge in their own kind of way, and then you can see how that works. And then that little phenomenon has a lot to do with the polar properties of water, because like I said, remember I said that the water kind of attaches to the side of the glass, like crawls up the side of the glass a little bit. It does the same thing with paper towels, but because paper towel is meant to be absorbent anyway, it's interacting with the water at a much faster speed. And so when you color it, you can see that phenomenon happening. And then we got some other stuff that we'll be doing with some base, what is that? Acid base indicator. I believe this is a base indicator. It's called thymol blue. So yeah, I'm excited. It's gonna be fun. And of course, we are at the end of the show, and RockTrue Beats is right behind. That's not copywritten, but I don't think y'all trying to steal it. I don't think y'all trying to steal that song. But Rock True Beats is coming up in about 30 minutes. I'm excited. I can't wait to see what the topic gonna be, what the hook gonna be. Cause I don't even hook on the okay. I didn't get a real nap in today, so that's probably what the effects of that. But as always, I had an amazing time here with y'all. Teach, learning, learn, teaching. All right. Because some of this stuff I had looked up. And of course, like I said, I always end up learning at least one or two new things while I'm trying to find some stuff to share with y'all. And it's definitely a refresher for a lot of this stuff. And I can't wait. Like I said, the halogens. The halogens going to be saucy. So that's going to close out the month for us. So we'll be doing our experiments next week. And then the following week, we'll be covering the halogens. I already talked about the noble gases, so we won't be doing those separately. And then the following months, we'll be going through the transition metals because those get real interesting, okay? And we'll be touching on a lot more inorganic chemistry with those. And yeah, it's crazy. It's gonna get fun, and I'm definitely gonna start bringing in a little bit more of like the engineering type aspects of some of this stuff, and the math not so much, because like I said, I'm not great at math, but I'm definitely going to try and find some like my math savvy friends and bring them on as guests, because maybe they can explain that stuff a lot better than me. And yeah, so if y'all know anybody who's in a STEM field, and if they got something going on, or they just want to talk about it, even if it's not, it don't even have to have nothing to do with the topic of the show. Well, they gonna have their own section to do whatever they want to do. So please suggest them, refer them. You can reach out to myself, or if you, I know y'all, I know some of y'all might know Selena. So Selena K, and send them our way, because we here to show people that there are jobs for people that look like us. Okay, you can do it. All right. So that being said, as always and forever, okay, I'm done, y'all. Rock truth or nothing at all.